I was born in 1935. I'm 70 years old. I got to Alcoholics Anonymous January 20th, 1983 for good and all. I'm a Texas boy. I got born in Texas. I was the only child in a small farming community about 45 miles northeast of Dallas. I never had looked at my life until I wrote my fourth and took my fifth. I never really sat down and I looked at it, and one of the things that bewildered me is how could I lived a kind of a life of Jack Armstrong, all-American boy. I wasn't a cradle alcoholic. I probably didn't drink hard liquor until I was 20. I was in college. How in the world could I end up in an organization like this in 1983 after I had done and accomplished so many things? When I was turning about 14, my dad explained to me that the singing and the voice lessons were all over and it's time to play football. And in Texas, football is pretty important, and my dad was pretty serious about that. I was rewarded. I made All-State. I made a lot of touchdowns. He also informed me when I went into high school that I would be valedictorian, and he didn't ask me if I wanted to be valedictorian. So you really didn't have any trouble getting a college scholarship if you were valedictorian and football and made lots of touchdowns and ran fast. And I didn't have a choice when I went to college. I wanted to go to Southern Methodist University in Dallas because that's where all the beautiful women were, and he sent me to Texas A&M. That's where we marched around in uniforms and there wasn't any females, and I stayed there 1 year, and I transferred over to where I graduated from. I went to a smaller college, and my lady friend, who I later married, was there, and I did quite well. I got a scholarship. I went in and told the coach I had played freshman ball in A&M, and he could look at me for 4 or 5 days. If he wanted to give me a scholarship, then I'd play, but if otherwise, I wasn't going to stay out and waste my time or his time. And I did quite well. I got my commission in college, ROTC, and I was commissioned an officer. And they told me I wouldn't be called up because I wasn't a pilot, and they wouldn't call me up for 2 or 3 years. And within 3 months, I got my greetings, and in January of 1958, I entered the Air Force. It seemed like to me everybody in the Air Force liked to drink, so I began to drink, and I liked it. I really liked it. It kind of relaxed me, and I could dialogue with them, and etc. And our first year of coaching this on the Hickam Air Force Base, we lost every game. In a 12-month period, I was probably on the road traveling 8 months out of 12. And my marriage had become fragile at that time, primarily over drinking. We got along in the other areas, but by this time, having drank quite a few years, my capacity for alcohol was beginning to slacken, and the only one that didn't know that I couldn't drink as much was me. You know, I just kept drinking normally. I went home, and nobody was home. My 2 sons were gone, my wife, and I hadn't been home more than 10 minutes, and somebody knocked on the door, and he said, nothing personal in this, I have to deliver these papers to you. And I didn't know what the hell he was talking about, you know, and it was divorce papers, and that really upset me considerably. My drinking at that point had really, when I was going through the divorce, it just increased, you know. Every night it seemed like I'd go alone to a local pub around here, or they had a small officers club over there, and I'd drink there. I met this charming lady about 2 years after the divorce. I met her in Southern California, and she called me up one day and she says, I'm coming up. And I said, oh, you are? And I said, she said, yeah, I want to be with you. And she moved up here, and we got married about a year and a half later for my second marriage. And her name was Lee, and she was from Canada, and she was the love of my life. She went through the last phases of dark drinking. And I was just a little tired, and one morning about 10:30, I told my boss I had to go to the hospital, and I went to El Camino emergency ward, and I sat in a little room with a nurse, and she was trying to find out what was wrong with me, and all I could tell her was I was just a bit tired. I couldn't tell her I had a drinking problem. I just kept telling her quietly with my head down looking at the floor that I was tired. And so they put me inside the lockdown part of El Camino Hospital, and I didn't like that at all because they didn't understand I was a colonel and I had a master's degree and I had done all these things, and I'd be happy to show them my resume if they just asked. By the next morning they had verified that I had insurance, and that's what they were really interested in. And then they found a place up in Hayward called Starting Point. I think it was Hayward, it may have been Fremont, but anyway, I was whisked off up to a recovery program, and I didn't even get to go home and get my shaving gear or change of clothes or anything. And I think they were wise about that, because I probably would not have proceeded up there by myself. Every morning right after breakfast, we read in groups. We read the big book, and you'd read a page or I'd read a page, and I went to her after I'd been there about a week, and I said, could I make a suggestion? And she said, absolutely. I said, well, could we divide the groups into those that can read and those that can't read? Because I read pretty fast, and that was part of my training, and I would read it probably half a chapter by the time we finished 3 paragraphs. And it was really irritating the hell out of me when it was costing $12,000. I didn't, it cost me $2,000, but it cost my insurance $10,000. And they passed out 30-day medallions, and I didn't get one. And that was my last conversation with the director. I went to her and I said, you do realize I didn't get a medallion? And she said, yes, we understand. Well, it was the opinion of the faculty that you weren't going to stay sober. And I said, well, that's wonderful. I appreciate that. And we all packed up our little duffel bags, and we were leaving, and there were 4 guys that worked at Oakland Airport, mechanics on airliners, and they wanted me to go join them 1 block away to have a couple of beers, and down they went. And I had such a resentment about no metal chip, I didn't go with them. So I stayed sober. I didn't stay sober, I stayed dry for 6 months, 2 weeks, and 3 days. The night that I called Alcoholics Anonymous, I was home, and my wife had moved out. We had been going to work Monday morning. We got in separate cars, and she went off her way and I went off mine. And when I got home that night, about 6 o'clock at home, we lived down in Chateau La Salle on Monterey Road. There was nothing left. There was 3 glasses, 3 dishes, television, a bed, and she'd moved everything out. She called me about 8 o'clock, and I'd had a couple of drinks, and she said, I love you very much, but I just can't live with you anymore. And I drank for another couple of days, and then I was standing there alone in my home, and I fell down on one knee, and I said, God, I can't drink anymore. When I came back in to Alcoholics Anonymous January of '83, I was broken and defeated. I had been beaten into a sense of reasonableness, and I want to share with you, if you happen to be like I was and don't have a desire, that this thing is not going to work. I learned that through the years. I had a real dear friend that went back out, and I tried to I chased him all over the Santa Clara Valley trying to get him back into Alcoholics Anonymous, and I never got him back. He died behind a liquor store in 1999. And that taught me a lot about what alcohol can do to you. Third meeting I went to was at Alano East. The greeter at the door happened to be my bartender, James Posniak, and that was very difficult. I stopped, and he stared at me, and I could still visualize him standing there, and he said, "What the hell are you doing here?" It was a Saturday night speaker meeting in Alano East, and I was frozen, and I couldn't talk, and he came over and put his arms around me and said, "You don't have to drink anymore if you don't want to." Steps. I had gone through 1, 2, 3 with Paz, and as I look back over the years, he saved my life. God put him in my life that night, and he broke my denial. Very, very difficult to argue and debate with your bartender. A program of staying sober, I guess I discovered that alcohol was but a symptom of my problem. My problem was me and my various underlying traits. And that was my denial that I didn't want to look at myself and the wreckage I had scattered around. And over the years, I've discovered a common trait. I think alcoholics in general are far more alike in the areas of feelings and emotions than we're different. And I don't think that makes it much difference whether you're male or female. And I think I've learned through the years, I think the female alcoholic is stronger than the male. I think we're just kind of pipsqueaks when we arrive here. I don't think we really want to take a look at ourselves at all. Pat and I we went to Canada to the 70th anniversary of Alcoholics Anonymous, and it was unbelievable. That was the third one I had gone to. I don't know what it is about the conventions, except that you can just feel. I never did, haven't seen the actual attendance there, but that first opening meeting, I don't know, there were probably 50,000 there. But at the end of the Lord's Prayer, at the end of the opening night, this lady singer came out and sang Amazing Grace, How Sweet Thou Art to Save a Wretch Like Me. And the whole audience joined in with her a little bit later. And that should be our theme song, if we have a theme song. I was in a church the other day and picked up a hymnal and read the words, and they're very specific and could apply to any alcoholic.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. Was blind.